Hi, I'm Dan Barker, and welcome to Freethought Matters.
And I'm Annie-Laurie Gaylor, and Dan and I are co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, working to keep state and church separate and to educate the public about the views of non-believers.
And one of those non-believers, freethinker, non-theist, is Jarred Dunn. Jarred is an award-winning classical pianist. He's traveled all over the world. He's also taught piano at the Steinway Gallery and at the Frederick Chopin University of Music.
And Jarred has been playing the piano for 26 of his 29 years, including a recital right here at Freethought Hall. And we're delighted to have you here today, Jarred.
Thank you.
So you just got back from Europe where you won, what did you win? First place in the Chopin in Lithuania. What was it?
Yeah, the International Chopin Competition of Lithuania.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many competitors were there, or how many performers?
To be honest, I don't know, but the final would have had maybe 6, 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what an honor. So Chopin is one of your favorites, huh?
The favorite, I have to say, yeah.
And you spent time in Poland, too. You got a degree in Poland?
That's right. I did my master's and artist diploma, postgraduate diploma there as well.
Wow.
I live there now.
Wow, okay.
Right.
But you're originally from Canada.
That's right, yeah.
So before we talk a little bit about what you found out about the views on religion of Chopin, what about you? You're an atheist today, but I think you have a very interesting deconversion story.
Yes, I think so. I was raised in a very a Christian home, and we were taught all of the evangelical bromides that exist in that environment. But none of them ever really made sense to me. They seemed to defy everything that I saw exemplified in music, the sense of beauty and rhetoric and openness to the world, whereas religion seemed to be, or at least the religion in which I was raised, was very closed-minded and limiting. And at some point, I think in maybe Sunday school when I was around 7 years old, they were showing us a video of Christ at the crucifixion, and I got sick. And everyone turned to me and asked, why are you vomiting? I said, why are you all not vomiting? This is unbelievable.
Because of the blood and the suffering and all that agony thing?
Yeah, and the metaphor of drinking it and eating it just seemed cannibalism. Are you serious? So some of this just didn't work. And then I would go home and practice and say, well, this is much more beautiful and much less gory. And there were just so many indicators to me along the way that this doesn't add up. I think the main moment that I knew this cannot be, at least for me, it's not going to be the way I live, was when I realized that in order to succeed, so to speak, religiously speaking, you have to give up everything in yourself in exchange for a fantasy world. And when I concluded that, I just knew this isn't for me. That was it. And I just focused exclusively on the piano. Still went to church for many years. And when I started to explain to people that I was an atheist, a lot of them said, no, there's no way. I mean, you're underestimating how deeply you believed and how much God loves you and all these things. And I said, no, this is a very strong cult mentality, and I didn't want to be excommunicated from it. I was very scared of it.
You told a story about when you were a little boy, you saw some sheet music on the piano and you pointed to it and you said, look how beautiful that is. Just by looking at the music on the piano, you could see were you hearing it too, or were you just looking at the... Wow.
That was the Schubert Serenade and Beethoven Opus 27 No. 2 Sonata, the Moonlight, famously. My mother came and saw me crying, and I said, can you see how beautiful this is? This is really incredible. And I remember my first recital. I played Bach and Beethoven, the C-sharp minor sonata. And it gave me a euphoria and sense of purpose that everybody was describing in church that I certainly couldn't find within any kind of religious doctrine or the Bible, certainly nothing there. So I just kept reading music instead of the Bible, and it evolved from there. Yeah.
In some reviews of your music that I've read, of your performance, said you are evocative and mystical or something. They use these phrases that it's just, you have this beautiful, almost ethereal feeling in your music.
It does feel like that when I play, because when I was young and impressionable about the world, I guess, more vulnerable, it was an escape. And I was in such a deep level of fantasy about the music, and I was so absorbed in especially Chopin and Beethoven that I think that grew with me as I developed and eventually left religion and church-based social circles. the sense of fantasy remained with me. And since I had that from when I was young out of necessity, I just never abandoned it. So I still feel very much like the 7-year-old kid pointing at the Moonlight Sonata, wondering, how did this happen? You know?
So before we hear some of you play Chopin, you were in Poland.
Yes.
You had a fellowship, right? Or a
I did my master's there.
Master's there.
That's right.
So you started to do a little investigating about Chopin's views on religion.
That's
and
right.
What did you find out?
He was brought up Catholic and always professed it officially, but then he moved to Paris and never attended and was never known in religious circles. And I found it interesting that his music seems to defy everything about religious order in general. He was a very conservative person, and I don't think anyone, no matter how deeply we research, will ever know exactly what he thought. But he did regard the sacraments as, I don't even know, unnecessary, and he never observed them in any serious way.
And of course, he got together with Georges Sand,
Yes.
who was a real radical
Yes, she
feminist,
was.
and I think she might have been a deist, but totally irreverent, totally
Yes.
a-religious. So obviously, there was some simpatico there.
That's right. And in their sojourn to Majorca, they cohabited together, and the islanders were so offended that this unmarried couple were together. And the fact is, he never capitulated and married her. So that's a big deal for a Catholic or someone who professes to be a Catholic. And I think that based on that evidence, we can conclude if he was a deist of any kind, he didn't feel it in his art. And that's what he wanted to leave the world, was his contribution to music. So there isn't any sacred music that I'm aware of, just piano music, concertos, some
That's
chamber
right.
music. So I really don't see any evidence for anyone religious, other than on an official, go with the social norm basis. I found that really interesting because, of course, many people when I grew up were saying, as I played, well, it's wonderful that you're worshiping God using your music. And of course I said, yes, isn't it? But internally I had this sense of freedom from this concept, and I feel like possibly Chopin felt this too.
So let's listen to some Chopin. What are we going to hear?
I think I'll start with the Mazurka, since they were
All
his
right.
personal diary, the A minor Mazurka from Opus 59.
Let's listen.
And that is Jarred Dunn, the internationally known, award-winning pianist playing some Chopin. And after the break, we will hear some more music from Jarred Dunn. I'm Dan Barker. Stay tuned for more Freethought Matters.
I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, upon the general populace.
Let's restore respect for America's secular roots. Help the Freedom from Religion Foundation defend the wall of separation between state and church. Join us at FFRF.org. Freedom depends on freethinkers.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
Welcome back to Freethought Matters. And Jarred, we were listening to you play a little Debussy. What was that?
It was called Jardin sous la pluie, Gardens Under the Rain.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And Debussy was something of a free thinker. He said he didn't do anything religious, and he said things similar to what you say about how music is all you need, really.
That's right. I think he got his inspiration predominantly from other cultures and exploring the world that he was unable to travel to. And in particular, he mentioned that nature and contemplation on nature and beauty in the natural world was what he would call religion.
Yeah, not supernatural, but just natural.
No, I think he was a very sardonic personality and sarcastic in general, and he was anti-establishment totally. So when I play his music, I feel that inspiration in him to look around at what we can see and experience, and he for example, he would cause, after looking at a beautiful painting in the Louvre, he would imagine the storyline to this painting and create music that illustrated it. So you could have this painting, if you close your eye and imagine it, you can see it in motion. And this type of imagination, to me, is sublime.
Well, your playing is beautiful. When you're playing, does it help you to think of the life of the composer and what was in the mind of the composer?
To an extent, yes. It used to. When I was young, I would need that in order to feel the connection to them. When I was still studying in a more fundamental way, it always helped because I loved reading the history of these people. It fascinated me that they could exist, because of course within a church environment you don't hear a lot about that in any glorified way. And I found, for example, the history of Debussy's life or Chopin's life or Liszt's life to be a wonderful example of being cultured and brilliant and also being human. But now when I play, I feel that my dialogue with the piece is more important than solely the composer's version, because as you mature as an artist, I feel you find your voice and are comfortable with your view on it, having filtered enough of the source information of the composer, and you have your take on it, and people start believing it more.
So
it's not just your interpretation.
Yeah.
It's not just the composer speaking, it's you speaking as well. You're
That's
making
right.
it your own.
Mhm.
Wow.
So what are you doing now in terms of, you do a lot of performances around the
Yes.
world? You teach?
I teach a lot of master classes, and actually I keep up with many of my students from Canada and the States via Skype. So from my apartment in Poland, we turn on Skype and I teach them that way, and they're doing very well in
Wow.
general. Yeah. Many people at first ask, how could you teach a piano lesson on Skype? And the technical jargon is unimportant now, but the main thing that I love about it is it keeps them independent, and they can't rely on me to do all the work in the lesson. I have to describe for them what they should do, and they have to see it on their piano with their hand. And then when I see them in person, they value it more, I think. Master classes also happen a lot, and usually conjoined with them are recitals. Last week in Toronto, I gave 5 recitals over 3 days. In Poland, there are many, many opportunities to play. Cultural centers and, of course, orchestras are everywhere. It's not always easy to get performances with orchestras, but in Poland I've played with 2 symphonies, and in Belarus with the State Radio Orchestra. Next year in Vilnius, after having won this competition, they gave me a concerto prize, and I have a few engagements there. Afloat right now is a tour of China, so that the
Wow.
details are not yet set, but that should happen sometime next year.
Now, as a millennial,
Yeah.
how are the millennials with classical music? Are they appreciative, or is it,
That's a
who's
very
the audience?
I'm reticent to answer, depending on who's listening to this. I think it varies. If, and I feel I found this, a performer is capable of putting into words and explaining the music in a way that is compelling to an audience, it tends to travel. And so my recitals, when I began to give them more frequently in Canada, were predominantly more mature audiences. And I find more and more the students of those teachers who come and listen are visiting my recitals because they know they'll learn something valuable about the music. I don't sit at the piano and play and expect everyone to be able to enter that world without a translation verbally. And so now in my recitals, I find there's a good mix of, but I couldn't make a comment, I think, generally on millennials because I travel too much to really know one group of them.
And so you've also, we have an excerpt of Beethoven. And what do we know about Beethoven and religion?
His teacher, Haydn, was completely convinced he wasn't religious, which was a very controversial thing at the time. And he, like Debussy, loved nature. He loved walking in the woods outside of Vienna. He was an unorthodox person, as everybody knows. And in general, he felt the God concept was a universality thing, a connecting force between human beings, and never observed any religious traditions.
And he worked with Schiller, von Schiller, who was definitely a free-thinking type.
That's right.
Deist.
Well, then Brahms, of course. Brahms also worked primarily in Vienna, and his music was all natural. And you play Brahms, right?
Yes. I just got off performing the first concerto, and I'm a little exhausted, so even hearing his name evokes yawning. But not because of the music, it's just such thick music. He grew up in very difficult circumstances, playing in bars and taverns and inappropriate places like this. I think he was around a lot of debauchery, to be honest, and he never developed a sense of what religion would involve because it didn't interest him. Bach interested him and Beethoven interested him, but I found it's an interesting point, actually, when I think about it. I never absorbed much of the religious nonsense that was thrown at me because I was too busy trying to memorize fugues and sonatas. And Brahms the same. And for the longest time I had an aversion to playing his music because it felt like too much of a mirror of me. And when I finally realized I had spent my formative years just learning music, and I discovered how glorious his pieces are and how vast and dramatic and so forth, that's when I connected with them, when I had sort of gotten over, I think, emotionally speaking, what I had gone through related to religion, it was much easier to play his music. Now I love it.
And he was quite a humanitarian, too.
What I like about Brahms is that he only wrote what he wanted.
Yes.
He didn't write for the church, he didn't write for the nobility, he just wrote what he wanted.
That's right.
He didn't write any religious music except that Requiem,
The German
which
Requiem.
the Requiem was really about those who mourn and grieve. It wasn't about an afterlife or any of that. So
yeah, and he didn't name it Requiem Mass, he named it German. So there's
the
always,
German Mass, yeah.
Do you know something? I find it so interesting to look at the titular history of classical music, how people chose to use words to get around societal expectations or economic expectations on their music. And in particular, I like this in Brahms, that he labeled it German Requiem rather than Mozart or the Requiem Mass, for example.
Although Mozart was not very good Catholic either.
No, I don't think, and his wife would agree with you there.
Well, then another atheistic composer who wrote a Requiem was Verdi, you know, so here they are, they're using the Bible as a source, not because they believe it, but because it was a literary vehicle for their music.
And it was also quite saleable to write for the masses who were observant, and it was a way to make the music accessible to them. They understood the themes that were going on in this music, and they could connect to them in a narrative way.
So, Jarred, you've played the Steinway piano at our Freethought Hall, the diannual Steinway piano. What do you think of our piano? It's a pretty new one.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I love the sound. Particularly the soprano register is soft and also bright in a certain sense. It's a really beautiful sound.
And you actually taught at the Steinway Gallery. Is that in New York City?
No, I taught at the one in Toronto.
Oh, Steinway Gallery in Toronto.
I give master classes there yearly to young pianists. Yeah.
So you're helping a younger generation of people come up to appreciate the music.
That's right. Yeah.
Real music.
That's it.
Natural music.
Yes, I think so. I love teaching. I was always an oddball in school because I wasn't chasing for agents or competitions, although I ended up winning a couple of them. I always wanted to teach.
Wow.
I love teaching, and I love working with young artists. In particular, when I meet someone with the zeal, the level of zeal that I had for music when I was little, even if they're very different from me or their artistic vision is different, I gravitate toward doing this.
Do you think somebody later in life could be proficient if they started in their teens? Or you started when you were 3, I think, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't recommend that, but yes, definitely. I have students who are actually mostly teachers study with me for professional development, and I'm noticing more and more their proclivity toward developing themselves, not only in terms of their conception and interpretation of the music, but technically speaking, yes, they take strides, and the learning never stops.
We're going to end the show by listening to a little bit of, what are we going to hear?
Chopin Berceuse, Opus 57.
The Chopin Berceuse?
That's right, yes.
What does Berceuse mean? Do you know?
It's a lullaby.
A lullaby?
Yeah, a cradle song. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. We're really honored to have you here after all your world travels.
Thank you.
Especially to meet a kindred non-spirit.
Terrific phrase.
Who understands that real beauty is in the natural world. So we're going to go out of our show today by listening to Jarred Dunn performing some Chopin. I am Dan Barker.
I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor, and thank you for watching Freethought Matters.